We're going to be live here for the next 3 hours, and I have an amazing guest. I've heard her on other talk shows, and I've heard no one who is able to just chronologically break down how wicked the TSA takeover of America is and how it's a bellwether federalization prisoner training program to train Americans to feel like we are worthless, dirty criminals that line up at the Nazi checkpoints nationwide, and not just in trains or planes or automobiles, but in public buildings and shopping malls, open spaces, public commons, as they call them. So we're going to be talking to Becky Akers coming up in the second hour today. Joining us from Germany via video Skype tomorrow will be Lyndon LaRouche. We also have George Humphrey, former Austin City Council member, businessman, economist. He's going to be in studio with us tomorrow. I have some other big guests throughout the week. Obviously, we had Ron Paul on the broadcast yesterday with a very important news. Ron Paul, Obama's Libya war is a power grab, is impeachable. Again, Ron Paul, Obama's Libya war, power grab, impeachable. Obama's Libyan war, power grab is impeachable. Need to add an is there, I believe. But that article is up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com right now, and important to get out to everyone. We need to continue to point out that the presidency becomes a imperial office. It becomes a kingdom. He becomes a literal ruler if these precedents are allowed to continue. And, of course, the ruler only takes orders from one group, and that's the United Nations. And they're just putting the globalist agenda in, whether we like it or not. Later in the broadcast, I have a microcosm of the United States and the rest of the world, how the mafia operates now. A green and carbon neutral Formula One. The debate now in Austin isn't about hundreds of millions of dollars to the Formula One dynasty, who all over Europe has gotten taxpayers to pay for their billion-dollar facilities. Now that shifted away, and now Austin, after saying they wouldn't pay for it, is saying that taxpayers will. Meanwhile, the guy's daughter has 2 homes worth over $200 million apiece, one of them over $100 million, the biggest mansion in the U.S., 150 mil total. And don't worry, her daddy's getting 250+ mil, but he's playing along with the global mafia. The F1 will purchase carbon offsets or indulgences, like you 500 years ago would try to get your family out of purgatory. You'd have to pay the Pope. Well, now you don't do that. To get your family out of hell or out of purgatory, you just pay the Austin City Council, who openly has announced a $3.6 billion increase in the next 3 years, last year, so we're a year into it, of all electricity cost to save the earth. Of course, it really just saves the big mega banks that own the power companies that are raping us. But hey, pay more for electricity. It'll save the earth. And so we'll get into all those carbon offsets. Also, Lindsay Lohan and Ron Paul have something in common, the Atlantic reports. They try to make fun of her. She's concerned about hyperinflation and dollar devaluation and likes Ron Paul. So Lindsay Lohan's been off drugs a while, I'm told, and starting to join the company of men. People say men, yes, humankind, mankind. So good job, Lindsay, there. And we're going to be talking more about that. I mean, they just openly say we're going to lose the dollar as the world reserve currency. And the pro-Federal Reserve camp followers like the Atlantic are scorning anyone that dares be involved in reality. Ha, ha, ha. They're concerned with our currency. Why, we're going the way of Mexico with currency devaluation, but so what? It's good to go from a first world to a third world nation. It's fun. And to have cities implementing global UN policies outside of law to rape everyone, while all the real environmental degradation goes into ultra high gear. Just this last week, I saw articles about scores of species of pig that are part human, scores of goats that are part human, scores of cross-species humanzees. They're now putting on the market glowing cats. In fact, there was an article I was going to mention yesterday. It was, we can repull it from the stack, please. I want to get to that later in the hour. It was 10 signs of, crazy genetic engineering, I believe was the headline. from Infowars.com. And it was just the news of the last week. It was glowing cats to go on the market in the U.S. That's right. Part jellyfish. It's wonderful. Do you have any idea what happens when you start crossing all these species? We've had top genetic engineers on. It's just absolutely destroying the Earth's real biosphere. Oh, the Earth can grow back from fires. It can grow back from big earthquakes. It can grow back from even deforestation. But, of course, plants breathe carbon dioxide that we exhale. It's part of the life cycle, like in your terrarium. They're announcing carbon as a deadly nerve gas. But giant cyclotrons, nuclear reactors everywhere leaking and blowing up. Not a problem, Monbiot, the big global government green fascist, calls for. It's a sick way to give you false guilt so they can tax you and run your life and inspect your house and tell you what you can do. They're using the environmental laws to harass the Amish and farmers and people, but Big Agri is exempt. Grow up! You know, this weekend I was invited to a dinner party. I talked a little bit about this. They were admitting, yes, that humans aren't going to be needed soon, and then everybody in the establishment, microbiologist, talks about there's too many people and getting rid of them. And, you know, these folks, I guess, were proud that they don't have children. And then, you know, they were asking, well, you know, what do your children do? And well, they're homeschooled. And it was like, one female scientist was just, it doesn't matter. They win all the spelling bees and have the highest. It just, oh my gosh. Well, what about socialization? You mean learning how to be a cult member, learning how to hate your family, learning how to hate the Second Amendment? I mean, my children go to swim meets and play basketball and are with people, other children 4 or 5 days a week. There's a huge homeschool community. But again, no connection to reality. And then one of them, after they heard that, they had to create some idea of how we were bad. And so, they said to my 8-year-old son, what is wrong with your eye? What is wrong with it? Oh, what happened to you? Because he has a little birthmark. And he says, my birthmark. And they were like, oh, really? See, ooh, spying. I mean, these people are not connected to reality in any way, shape, or form. And they're everywhere. And it is their sacrament to not have children. My wife has had women walk up and gripe at her for having 3 children in grocery stores. You walk around in Whole Foods and you walk up to the counter and the magazines are how great it is to live under austerity and have nothing. It's a religious sacrament to be raped and robbed by the bankers who taught us how to overconsume, who taught us how to be petty and destructive, who built a civilization that was unsustainable so they could then have us completely dependent when they shut it off. See, it isn't that we're not wasting or we are wasting. It's another choice or many other choices. It's complex, varied thought, sophisticated thought. Your thought to think one-dimensional, two-dimensional, certainly not three-dimensionally, certainly not four-dimensionally. All right, I digress. Here. The big news is up on Infowars.com right now. EPA on radiation alert as fires reach 50 feet from Los Alamos nuke plant. And this is where they've got all sorts of test reactors, experimental systems, giant storage units of nuclear waste. The areas had nuclear testing going on for 60 years. And when there's fires, it releases all of that carbon, all of that chaff, all of that dust into the atmosphere. But don't worry. Suddenly, we've got the plant on the river there in Nebraska confirmed to be flooding on emergency backup generator power. Don't worry, Fukushima, 5 of the 6 damaged, 3 with complete meltdown. They knew that the first week, covered it up. And don't worry, Canada with a huge leak that happened 3 months ago. Don't worry, because even though the Northern Hemisphere has double the normal radiation and rising, the EPA has just risen the level they say is safe. They've just, and there's no alerts about don't drink the milk. There's no alerts about we better not let, especially children who have fast-growing cells. On average, radiation has 10 times the negative effects on them, even more on fetuses. No discussions about it. This is many times confirmed months ago, many times Chernobyl. Each Fukushima reactor blowing sky high, including the MOX 3, the MOX reactor at reactor 3, the 644,000 fuel rods stored on top, blown sky high, up to 1.5 miles away. The Japanese government just covered them up with bulldozers, leaking into the water, getting into the atmosphere, covering the entire United States, off the charts Chernobyl. And this is in 1986. The UN even admits over 1 million people contracted and died of cancer since then from Fukushima in their actuaries. They're not worried now because they wave a magic wand and say, eat the produce. Doesn't matter if months ago it tested all over the United States in vegetables. It tested in all the major milk, off the charts, 300, 500, depending on the state. I mean, they had Vermont milk testing hundreds of times above normal levels. And their answer is, you know what? As this radioactive orgy begins, it's not a problem. We raise the level of what we say is safe. But my gosh, we've got to raise all your taxes, and we got to micromanage everything you do, because when you exhale carbon dioxide that plants respirate from, it is a nerve gas of death. It is evil. The breath is evil. The radiation is Valhalla. Let us bathe in it. Let the cancers grow. Oh, Gaia loves it. Give us more. Before I get into all the Greece riots and their government voting to hand them over to the bankers for debt the bankers created, before I get into the fires approaching Los Alamos, before I get into all the other news, let me go ahead now and go over a few things that just came out in the last week. Genetic modification gone wild. 10 signs that our world may be destined to resemble a really bad science fiction movie. This is from The American Dream. We also posted it at Infowars.com. And going over this, number one, in China, scientists have inserted human genes into DNA of dairy cow embryos. At this point, approximately 200 hybrid cows have been successfully produced. They feed the milk to the military because, after all, they're slaves. These cows can produce milk that is virtually identical to human breast milk. The scientists hope to have huge herds of these cows producing an alternative to human breast milk soon, and they hope to have the milk sold in global supermarkets within 3 years. Number one, in Canada, scientists at the University of Guelph, in the province of Ontario, have produced what they're calling EnviroPigs. These EnviroPigs, goes on, have the genes from mice spliced into them, and accordingly, the scientists say that they produce less phosphorus in their excrement, so that they are being touted as environmentally friendly. Authorities in both the U.S. and Canada are evaluating whether or not to allow EnviroPigs into the food supply. There's already cloned food in the food supply. And, of course, they won't let you know in labeling if it is. And they won't let you know if the salmon is part insect and other fish mixed in. And, again, when you splice these genes, it has all sorts of unintended consequences. But a lot of them are intended. A lot of times the reason they engineer something is just the cover. In every major study of the GMO crops they've put out, the staple food crops, they always reduce fertility in every major rodent study. Just pull it up. Scientists in Japan have created a genetically modified mouse that tweets like a bird. Yeah, 30 years ago they had mice that grew human ears on their backs. Number four, one U.S. corporation can now produce a very muscular monster salmon, which can grow up to 3 times as fast as normal salmon do. And major university studies show within 40 generations it will extinct the open sea normal salmon. That's okay. That's 40 years. Scientists can now produce cats that glow in the dark. A genetically modified cat created by scientists named Mr. Green was the very first fluorescent cat in the United States, but Mr. Green genes was not the first glow-in-the-dark cat in the world. That honor went to the cat created by a team of scientists in South Korea. In Japan, scientists have discovered that they can grow rat organs inside of mice. These researchers hope to use the same technology to grow human organs inside pigs. That was going on 15 years ago, by the way. This is all old news. They had human clones 15-plus years ago, but they only grow them up to a certain size inside the cow uterus.